Welcome back to APIs You Won't Hate. My name is Mike Bifulco, one of the co-hosts of the show, and I am sitting down for an interview this afternoon with someone who I'm really, really excited to chat about. You may know if you've been listening to the show long enough or hearing me prattle on the internet for long enough that I worked for a while on the Google Assistant team in the world of voice tech and voice software and the land of assistants and IoT and automation, all that stuff. That is one of the reasons that I'm super excited to chat with this founder. And the other reason, of course, is that Nikhil Gupta is joining me from Wapi. He's also a Y Combinator founder. So we have many sort of related parallel lives seemingly going on here. I'm super excited to talk about what you're building. The pitch on the website, the H1 on your site says voice AI for developers, which I think paints a lot of story for a lot of people listening. But Nikhil, thanks a ton for joining. I appreciate you being here today. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, Mike. Excited
Of
to
course.
chat about Vapi and so curious to hear kind of the stories of voices like Google Assistant and what's happening there now. I bet everyone is wondering now too. Yeah. So if you have any deep to share with us, that would be great. And it's super fascinating. The whole world around us is like going to change, right? Like the way we talk to like the way we interact with computers, the way we interact with like microwaves. I think that's all about to change in the next like 5 years. Right? Like the fabric of like interaction. And I think that was pretty clear to people when they saw that GPT-4o demo. So excited to get into it. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. So we're a couple of weeks out from GPT-4o, which is the O stands for Omni
Omni.
channel,
Omni.
omnipresent, Omni, yeah, just
Yeah.
Omni in
Yeah.
general. So
Yeah.
this is the first like multimodal GPT from OpenAI, which I think has really changed the way a lot of people are thinking about the software. And so we're definitely in a changing landscape, especially since I left Google Assistant 2 years ago at this point, and at that time things were very different. But before we get into that, let's start with you here. Give me
Sure.
first of all the elevator pitch for Wapi. What's the story? What do you sell it to people as?
Yeah. Sure. The elevator pitch is, yeah, voice AI for developers. You want to add voice bots to your phones, website, apps. We provide like a modular interface that's easy to use, easy to configure, and get you up and running very quickly. The I guess like the favorite thing for developers is like the modularity of it. You don't like OpenAI, you want to use Anthropic, you can use Anthropic. You don't like 11 Labs, you can use PhD. There's like different options for like transcribers. Hey, you want to like integrate like Make, Zapier, like tools, like multi-assistant, like all that kind of configurability that I think exists a lot out there for like chat that you can bring to voice. And the future, I guess, like, is pretty clear to people, right? Where when you call into a restaurant, most likely you'll be talking to an AI. And that's kind of what we're building. The bricks and pieces, the shovels to help you get that up and running in a day, in a couple hours, instead of like month.
Sure. Something that would have sounded like an absolute miracle just a few years ago, maybe even a few months ago, if you think about it. Definitely compelling for anyone working in a world where your end users are, especially consumer focused, I'd imagine. There's lots to be said there, but in service industry, that's really interesting, and customer service of any sort. Myriad use cases for that. That's super cool.
I mean, I think one thing I want to highlight there is like, I think everyone dreads like calling into United, right? Like AT&T, like tax, like IRS, but pretty conceivable that we would love calling them in the future because they'll be like, they have like such great AIs, they're so patient, they have so knowledgeable, and you just call them in and like they can immediately answer like what's happening with your flight, like can they like cancel, move it around. So there is an interesting kind of change there too. Like one, the experience improves, but does it also mean like the world went from like phone calling to like chat because like it's very expensive for these companies to like host voice experiences because it involves humans in the background, where it's like chat could be more structured. And now it's like, what is the inherent desire for people? Do they want to use voice or chat? So that I think is also going to be interesting in the future, where you can just call into AT&T and it'll be like a great experience, which is weird to think, but it will come. I think that'll come.
Sure. Yeah, I love the one word you used there, which is really interesting to me, is patience. Like having an operator on the phone who's patient is kind of also a pretty big game changer. I don't think people think of it this way, but usually if you call in customer support somewhere, or even if it's a restaurant, for example, you call in and speak to someone, they're a complicated person with a busy day and probably lots going on. And you're almost certainly not the first chat they've had that day. And I would imagine many customer service people have had negative experiences just about every day with someone who's mad about something. And the nice thing about building a voice agent programmatically is that they don't get tired. They might not experience
Yeah.
that. And if they're kind and polite and all that, it really changes the way that people interface with things. That's super
I
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe I can talk a bit about like, right now, if you were to kind of try to create this future, maybe you want to build a company, maybe you want to build like a small agency, or maybe you're a small business. Like there's kind of different personas here of like who would want to use like voice AI. There's a couple options, right? Like you can take 11 Labs, DeepGram, and OpenAI off the shelf and like sort of stitch them together. That process will take you at least a couple of weeks, like if not months. Once you have stitched it together, you would have to kind of figure out how to like scale that system, because these are what's interesting about like multimodal and like I guess voice specifically. As soon as you enter like realms outside of text, is these are stateful, long-lived jobs. And maybe this is a little technical center, but I think we have a technical audience. Like when you hear stateful, long-lived, I think that's like alarm bells go off for people. It's like, oh, that sucks. Like, but that's the reality. Like where these GPUs are running, which contain the context of the conversation. So ultimately, when a person is calling, they have to be pinned to something, like a resource in the backend. So scaling that out as a system is like a very complex undertaking, and that's kind of the value we bring in. Where if you harken back to like Twilio or Stripe, right? Like early days, payments could be done where you just had to fill like this divergent form with like Wells Fargo, and like you could get set up like to accept payment on your website. Same for like Twilio. Like if you wanted to send a text, like it's totally possible you could get a contract with like Verizon, AT&T. But Twilio just offered like, here's an API. Give me the number you want to call. Give me the text you want to send them. Done. So that kind of ease of use is what we're trying to bring to like voice AI world, where here's the number I want to call, or here's my number, and here's a system prompt I want to use, and that's it. Done.
What I love about this is that it represents such a big change for this world. So clearly, I'm going to go pretty deep and nerdy on the things that have changed in voice tech in the past few years. But thinking back to the dawn of the first voice assistants, I'm reticent to say their names on a recording because I'll kick off actions on people's phones around the world. But Apple Assistant and Amazon's and Google's are all the initial programming interfaces for those were almost quite literally like imagine a tree structure for the types of conversations you want to have and build that tree for everything anyone could possibly say and have escape
Yes.
hatches for everything. And that's changed so dramatically by now that
Yeah.
AI is way, way better at picking up with context of the conversation and inferring things. And even like if you stutter into an AI, it won't freak out. It can understand that as well. It's super interesting. And you really are at the dawn of something where people can build very compelling things without a lot of work, without having to catalog the whole conversation.
Yep. Yep. It's exactly like that's the thing. The common thing we hear. So it's interesting because like when we started Vapi about a year ago, we were doing something else before, and when we started Vapi, we were expecting that there's a new platform being built, kind of the same way that iPhone kind of ushered in this like apps era, and then no one predicted like Uber would be the thing that like was a killer app. We were expecting like voice as this huge capability that's being unlocked as a platform. There would be like some really cool app. And I still believe that, like there'll be completely crazy apps, infrastructure, like, applications out there that are voice experience based. And I think we're seeing that in learning a little bit. They're hitting multi-million ARR. I know they're hitting like, they're on track to hit like, billion-dollar companies or multi-billion dollar, even ARRs. But that was like our kind of thesis where we wanted to help be the kind of infrastructure for this new platform, where a lot of like new experiences are going to be formed around voice. But the, to tie in what you were saying, a lot of use cases and surprising amount of like volume, like an insanely large volume exists in like the old world of telephony. And in like systems that people have built, like people have like teams of like 50, 100, like they're designing like these like flows, these conversations. And clearly that's like shifting to like prompt, like here's a system prompt, and making better bots faster is like is a thing that resonates with like this crowd of like telephony, which we're seeing a lot of adoption in. I feel like, I don't know, I'm like hopeful. I really want like new experiences, new interfaces. That's why we have like, for example, like a Python SDK that you can like set up like a AI toy with Vapi. It's not used as much
Yeah,
as like
sure.
the telephony stuff, but like I would love for that stuff to come more, as things happen.
Some of this, I feel like people need to come to the understanding that there is this like creative space where you can build things now that used to be much harder to do. And the fact that someone could pick up a Python SDK and in a few hours build a pretty impressive demo is like not necessarily obvious, even if you've used ChatGPT's, new audio features and the interactivity built into that from their app. It still feels kind of like magic is happening on your device. I feel like it's
Yeah.
that new.
Could be the just the newness of it.
Yeah.
I also wonder like how much of it is like there's a bit of like stasis, I think, because OpenAI is moving so fast that people are like not sure what to build because AJ is around the corner, right? Like what even is the point of like building anything? Which is totally fair. But like at the same time, everyone knows there's like so many huge opportunities. I'm just like not seeing them being capitalized, I guess as much.
Sure.
Which is
So,
interesting.
so let's take a step back. You mentioned a minute ago that you're only about a year old into building this product, or only been building it for about a year. Can you tell me about how Vapi got started, like what you were doing
Sure.
beforehand, and what was the genesis of all this?
Yeah. So we were building a meeting note taker, and it was called Silver Howard. It was great. Hit profitability, and we kind of realized the next milestone for us was like to get to like 10 mil ARR, which is the usual, milestone when you hit that kind of number. And we didn't want to spend our 20s like selling meeting software. It was
Sure.
not the most challenging, not the most like forward-looking, impactful thing we could be doing. We just thought like there's like a bigger technical challenge we could take on. And that, like, we're just engineers and like we just love technical problems. So started stumbling around on like finding what we could do. My co-founder one day in his depression of like pivot depression made this thing because we over the course of like our startup, we have spent around like 30 to 50K, I think, on like coaching, like founder coaching. We started the company when we were like right out of college, immature, didn't know how to work with emotions, communicate, the usual thing of like founder conflicts, and worked with a coach who saved our company. Like he's helped us articulate what we need from each other and work through
Yeah.
ourselves, our own mind. And that coaching was transformative, so transformative. We were like, oh, that like so my co-founder Jordan, he created that same experience basically with an AI, where that AI could like help him reflect back his thoughts, his emotions, kind of like an AI therapist.
Super.
The experience got better and better, but ultimately we realized there's still like the company that's focusing on like making this experience better. It needs to be the company itself. Like we cannot take on the problem of like making a great voice experience and making it like a great therapy, but those have to be separate companies. And we're like, oh, that's actually kind of great because we love technical, we're technical, we love technical problems, we love technical customers. Like we just want to work with startups and like really technical people. That it was just like a perfect alignment where, oh yeah, like this feels right. Like making APIs, that feels right for people,
Yeah.
and that's how we got into it.
Sure. Yeah, I think especially if you've had some coaching around like trying to reach scale and get to a point where if at that point you had taken on investment, like you really need to tackle some gargantuan problem. And to your point before about not wanting to spend your 20s selling meeting software, like you would need to sell all of the meeting software to really hit the scale that a lot of investors are looking for. And that has happened, right? Zoom certainly had a bit of a rocket launch over the past few years, but how many times can that happen? And almost the meta problem here is also really interesting too. Yeah,
Yes,
that's really
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. You're right. Like there's like something about like the space you're in which limits like what you can do as a ceiling. I do find like I go between in my mind between like I think the TAM is never the market. The TAM is the founder, which is like
Mm,
just keep finding new ways to like go like expand Tesla. Like robotics now. It's like okay, it's just random as hell. Like
sure.
SpaceX became Starlink. Like cool. So I do find like the TAM is always the founder, but yeah, like focusing like for us, it was just like we want to spend our time solving hard technical problems and offering great experiences for developers.
There's a lot of wisdom in your word. It sounds like you've probably been through like ingested the coaching in a way that was really healthy and have lived through a hard pivot with another founder. Having been down the startup road a few times myself. I've had the good, bad, and middle experiences of many lifetimes, I feel like, wrapped up in building startups. It's always interesting to hear someone who acknowledges that challenge as part of building the company too. That is a big thing that we don't talk about a lot in general.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've been trying for like 4.5 years now, like at it. We're winter 21, and
Good for you.
it's kind of. I mean, I think there's something to like. I think PG and Michael loves to say this, where where it's like what sometimes like founders are founders because they don't have anything else to do. Like I don't know what else I would do.
Yeah,
Like
agreed.
yeah.
All roads lead to
So
Rome.
we just gotta figure it out. That's we have
Sure.
another short for to figure it out, and that's where it's been a lot of fun. So I think for people kind of wondering, I mean, I think audience is very technical, wondering like what to do. It's I guess like the seed of like Vapi that feels so good is like I know I'm spending my time serving people I like a lot, and that is enjoyable in itself. Like no matter what happens to Vapi, so that like the seed of advice that people give around keep doing the thing you really like that you feel like especially passionate about, and like the moat or whatever advantage will come from that because you just
Right.
have like so much experience, like so much love for that thing, so much love at serving that thing. So that's then
Yeah. It has to be a problem you can care about for 10 years, not just
exactly,
18 months or something like that.
yeah, 100%. And like like when I think about like the common thing I hear, and maybe this could be a bubble, is that people love our API. It's like people love
Yeah.
the design of it. It's like easy to use. It makes sense. The validation is great. And that's the thing. Like I'm like really anal about like the little detail where like it has to be like, for example, like singular, not plural. Like it has to be like consistent in this format. There has to be like the same CRUD interface to all of these things. It has to be a noun. Like all these like, best practices that I'm sure people that I'm talking to here know about. But it's like, it's surprising to me when I look at other APIs. It's like, what was the design product here? Like, what the fuck was going on in their head, like making this interface? Like, make no sense to
Yeah.
me. Where having the opinion of like a good developer experience, like really caring about that, gives me joy. So that's been
Sure.
a lot of fun building.
You and I are just meeting for the first time, but I came into the world of APIs by way of studying user experience and human computer interaction. And so
Yeah.
being deeply embedded in the world of design, one of the things that I often say to people is that learning design is interesting because anyone can learn it, not something you're born with. But the
Yes.
curse of it is as you learn these rules and as you learn the things that break the rules, you see it everywhere. Right. So like by focusing on building an API that follows all these rules and uses plurals correctly and is thoughtful about the way interfaces are presented, you start to see all of the inadequacies of your own product, also other products, and they become more and more like little red irritations across your life. And
Yeah.
it's a blessing and a curse.
What's your favorite API you think out there?
So I'm definitely biased here because I also used to work at Stripe, so I was on the DevRel team there.
Yes.
And
Fair.
obviously, Stripe is the gold standard in many ways to work with. And I've through the course of my career, especially working in developer advocacy for a while, played with many APIs, small and large, to kind of build demos and show people how to do things. And I think so Stripe's API is wonderful. The documentation is incredible. The team is top notch, like super cool to see.
Yeah.
But there are also
Yeah.
smaller companies making things that are really interesting to use as well. Lately, I've been looking at weather APIs for various purposes for my current company, for Craftwork.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the most thoughtful APIs that I encounter are ones where I don't have to become a meteorologist to understand how to use it. And that should be the bar for everything. Like my lowly self should be able to get to your API and understand what's going on.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, like that's the kind of feedback I also would love to hear from people. That's like I always wonder, like when people show up, like we have a swagger, right? Like they show up to this. Does everything just make sense? Like it was just to look at the top level concepts that exist from the API, does everything come together? Yeah, Stripe is great because you don't. Stripe is very painful, but it rewards you. Like you go through the pain, and because it's so complex, but everything kind of does make sense. I think that's like where a lot of like teams like lose, I guess. Like the more complexity you add, can everything still seem coherent? Like as you learn, does your world make more sense, or does it make less sense? Because there's contradictions everywhere and like different ways to do things. Or is it just like there's one way to do a thing, and like yes, it's very complex, but like if you learn everything, it will make sense.
Totally.
Stripe does a great job of that for sure. I think there's something about like probably like I don't know if like AWS counts. I think AWS is
Sure.
like is also the kind of same thing where pretty complex, like very hard to work with. But like once you learn it, it's pretty okay. Everything makes sense. Actually, you know what my favorite API is? Kubernetes. That that's
Ah,
Kubernetes.
yeah.
Yes, Kubernetes. I might even say I like it better than Stripe.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a new
Yeah,
take for me for sure. Yeah.
it's I find like the documentation when you read through it, like they've read your mind. I think maybe the problem is that Stripe has too many customers.
Mm.
When you enter Stripe documentation, like they're trying to walk you through how to handle like subscriptions. They're trying to walk you through how to handle like, invoicing. They're trying to walk you through how to handle usage-based billing, and they try their best and it's great. But Kubernetes, you enter the route, and they already know what you're trying to do. They know that you're trying to deploy something that can scale. So they talk you through different concepts. Like the first thing they'll talk about is here's pods, here's services. It's just the documentation gives me joy reading it. Like I
Yeah.
this conversation with like the person who wrote it. It's awesome.
I wonder if you'll think of this as a hot take, but I see Kubernetes documentation and the way that they describe things in stark contrast to the way that Docker's developer experience is and was for a very long time. My feeling on Docker and figuring out how to make Docker work for a really, really long time was Docker can't tell you what Docker is, and you have to figure it out by trial and
No,
error.
yeah, I think Docker has excellent like dev interface. Like like the
Yeah.
Docker Swarm makes it really easy to like get things up and running. The Kubernetes is harder to get up and running, but yeah, like and Docker logs, for example, like everything sort of works. But yeah, like they have no clue what they're doing. It's kind of the vibe that you get for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you kind of have to know that Docker Compose and Docker Swarm exist to be able to figure
Yeah,
out what they do, and not obvious what either does, from the name alone. So let's talk about your use case. So you spent all this time building a great API. What is it like to use Wapi? Like, what is a Hello World look?
yeah. The Hello World is. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. The Hello World is you go to a dashboard. You don't even touch the API first, right? You go into the dashboard, and the first thing you'll see is like a prompt to create an assistant, and you select like and there's some templates options there, like hey, I want to make like a game NPC, or I want to make like a customer service, I want to make a on my scheduling. You click one of those assistants, you get a template, and after that one click, you should be able to. There's a button right that will show it is like talk to assistant, and that is like kind of the hello world. There, it's like you have created an assistant that you like, and you can talk to it, and what you'll see right front and center is like what's the configuration of the assistant. Like oh, like my name is not Domino's, my name is like Pizza Hut. It's like welcome to Pizza Hut. Like just changing that,
Sure.
that should give you the first like satisfaction of like creating the assistant and be able to talk to it. And then you know the dev experience, which is like, okay, where do you want to put this assistant? Do you want to put it on a phone number? Do you want to put it on your website? Do you want to put it in your app? I guess like that's where APIs and the experience, like dev experience enter. I haven't figured out the hello world for it, but then you would go to our documentation and then the kind of like it's like, choose your own journey. Like I want to create a phone number. Then you go to this doc. You want to create like put on a website, go to this doc.
I think it's an interesting case because there's a lot to be said for being able to just poke around with a thing and try it, especially with the case of what you're building. Kubernetes is a great example. If I know that when I get the API calls correct for Kubernetes, that I'm going to have something that does all this nice orchestration for me, and the outcomes of that are clear from the onset. But for the product you're building, the outcome is like a little more ambiguous and perhaps less clear in that, okay, if you execute these calls correctly, you now have a voice service. Is that
Yes.
any good? Right? Like the first thing you need
Yes.
to sell is the outcome of all this dev work going to be valuable?
Yeah.
And I think inverting the experience in that sense is honestly probably a really good choice.
That's like smart. Yeah, that's a very smart observation. I've never thought about it that way. All I know is like as a developer, I think the thing that probably like now I know like I have to just Stripe, right? But like I I wish Stripe just gave me like more joy, like before I even get started. Like those
Mm.
Stripe even work for me? And I think it takes me a long time to figure that out, that answer to that question for most dev tooling. Whereas I think we are trying to answer the question like, yeah, Vapi will just work for you. This is here's the assistant, and then it's the job is to just figure out how to like get that assistant in the right place that you need, which we have all the APIs for. But that I think about it a lot too, where like it's like, what is like in my like whereas dreams, like what would I love as a developer from this experience? You know, it's like what is like the most beautiful, amazing experience coming into Vapi? I don't have an answer to that question, but like yeah, the hello world is don't code. Go in, try something, and then if it looks good, get cracking.
Yeah, I think it's pretty compelling. And especially for this audience that we're talking to, so for API developers, you get two things out of the box before writing your first line of code. One is you can go and try the thing, right? You go to the dashboard, do that, and
Yes.
do your own experience. But naturally, I think most of the people listening to the show will also go to your API reference, right? Go to the docs themselves and see what's there. And like, there's a lot of good, juicy stuff in there. That in itself is exciting. And you can kind of see some of the thought and usability that comes out of that straight away. And to your credit too, there's a handy little button on a lot of pages on your site, maybe all of them, that says Ask AI, where you can maybe get some questions answered pretty directly
Yes.
too, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. Like too, where I think nowadays like dev tooling, like there's I think there's gonna be so much like so much rich experience around like dev tooling because a lot more kind of can exist thanks to like AI, right?
Yeah.
Like before, I think like if I was to think about like integrating a new API, it'd be like, oh man, I don't want to figure out the documentation. It just seems like insane. Like that sounds like a lot of work. Now like, I can go to the documentation, talk to the AI, and be like, okay, like I need to do this. Can you give me the code for it? It gives me the code, I just put it in my code. I'm like that.
Yeah.
It transformative, I think, to like like composable APIs. I think we're gonna see a birth of like so many API in this like next like 2-3 years. Pretty exciting for me. But yeah, I think for people like who are considering, I guess like yeah, like what would for API builders, I guess like the question the reason you would use Vapi is like maybe you should ask yourself is like what are you trying to build? Like are you a lot of our users are startups, right? Because they're trying to explore prototype, whether they want to sell into like a particular niche, like vertical SaaS, or I guess like the experience, like everyone knows, like in GPT 4.0 will be everywhere. Like that experience that they showed, I think that's going to be in every phone, every microwave, every car, those
Yeah.
assistants. So now the question is, do you want to bring that experience? Do you want to help get that experience deployed in different places? And you can wait for GPT 4 to come out, or you can use Vapi to get started on that right now. And then when we do have GPT-4, you'll just plug it in, or then you'll just have 100 anywhere to switch it over. And and then I guess it's for us to figure out like what other value we can add, which will be like observability tooling. Like if you have like a million calls that you're doing, are you gonna really use like the raw GPT-4 like OpenAI API, or are you gonna use like some production ready tooling around to make sure that your calls are going well? There's a observability tooling, that kind of thing is I think what people would use us for, and that's what we're here to provide. So yeah, I think whole crowd of people, like if you think voice is cool, if you think multimodal is cool, give it a try. Like make something prototype. It's so easy to prototype nowadays.
Sure. Yeah. The imagination should run wild and go build the things that you definitely wouldn't have been able to, in 2022 or however you want to look at that. Can you tell me about maybe an interesting use case or two that you've seen
Sure,
with Vapi?
sure. I can tell you the use case that they see. This is our first customer that we worked with. They do sales training that's called Hyperbound. And you can go to their website. It's really fun. It's called Hyperbound. I don't know the actual domain, but search up Hyperbound. It will show up. And you can call these bots to practice selling. So the founder, you can imagine like it's pretty learning how to sell. It's like a pretty key skill and pretty hard. You can practice on real humans, but then you're losing real deals. So with practicing with bots, and these bots are really hard to sell to. Like they will like hang up on you all the time. So that's an interesting kind of role play is a very interesting use case that we see where having AIs represent like hard conversations, having AIs represent like sales training. So that's like one category. And the other one that's pretty obvious is customer service, where people call into this restaurant like I want pizza here, or I want to book a reservation. Like here's an availability for a reservation. That kind of like function calling, Google calling use cases, or another What are other popular ones?
I'm curious. You mentioned your founder created a code bot early on.
Yeah,
Do you or your co-founder have any that you use for yourselves, maybe internally, externally, personally?
I use for testing my Nikhil bot,
Sure.
but I don't know. It's I what do I have? Like, I mean, there's one thing which is I don't like the experience of like ChatGPT like voice as much because I mean right now they haven't deployed it before I think in production for voice and being able to kind of brainstorm because like I'll get stuck on a problem and I just need to like
Yeah.
talk to one thing. Like, it's like okay, I need to think out loud with someone that's like intelligent. And I used to do this with my co-founder all the time, and now I need to do less than them with the AI. I don't know what that speaks for human connection, but it's just like yeah, I just flip it out and then I talk to it, but like I'm just holding it down because I'm still processing, and then I just like pick up the thing and it responds. So a brainstorming is a very common use case for me,
I do the
and
same.
yeah,
I have a weekly newsletter that I write on my personal site under my own name, MikeByFulco.com. I publish a newsletter for startup founders and JavaScript developers. And often I'll sit down in the morning and just brainstorm, like prattle through some ideas and try and, expand the idea to something that kind of has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't think 4.0 is deployed yet to that audio experience. And it's a little irritating when it doesn't work well. The biggest change and the most valuable thing for that is that now it has memory context where I had previously been like fine tuning things over and over or re-uploading transcripts. And now at least that part is getting better. And that's been a big helpful change.
that's awesome. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think my co-founder and I have a bet around like whether as like years go by or months go by, will people like will there be a widespread love for AI or widespread like skepticism around AI? My it's open question because people will be like, oh, AI is getting better, taking my job, or a lot of negativity. Or it's possible. Like I just think like when you look at like GPT-4o, like talking to that thing is like magical, like that demo, and it'll be hard not to like that experience and like want that thing
Yeah.
everywhere. So very curious to see that sentiment shift on AI. What will happen with text GPT-4o?
It is hard to tell. And I think the mindset is very split right now in many directions, old and
Yes,
young. I think men and women have different feelings on this. I think different generationally, Gen Z and millennial and all that. There's lots of different opinions on this stuff. And I think we'll figure it out over time. Yeah.
yeah, but I guess like, I don't know if you run into this, but like for example, my mom, she's like not very technical savvy, and for example, like she wants to learn how to like she's figured this out now, which is right, like how to post something on Instagram.
Yeah.
And the process for that is like you sh- sharing your screen, you're just kind of pointing her to a button, and they like press this, talking about it. Like to me, it just seems like it had to be so good at that. Like I think all people will love it. Like it's patiently just kind of looking at her screen and like talking you through like how to like do something.
Yeah.
That is pretty compelling.
Yeah. A big potential for a tender and loving experience that helps you grow at your speed, which is
Yes.
super interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So
So
cool.
let's get
Tell me a
it.
little bit more about how you're building Vapi. Like what is underlying your software?
So yeah, we decided to use Node because the thing. So what's that like? Why is voice harder than chat, right? And like OpenAI is now running here. It's like trying to deploy multimodal systems, is because with chat it's synchronous. Like it's like one thing after the other, thing after the other. With voice, the person is talking. They might stop again at any point, and then you start talking, but they might interrupt again. So there's like a very dynamic environment, which makes it hard to write like code for it. And so for us, like given that there's so much like there's you're getting audio every 20 milliseconds. Given that there's so much activity, you clearly need the event loop, right? You need like event loop, like audio is coming in, like process that. Is there something you want to say, like send that out? Like you need an event loop. Now, for an event loop, you could try to use Python, or you could use something else. You can make up some event loop in Rust. But I was like, Node. Node is such an obvious answer for me because I'm standing on the shoulder of giant. Like this event loop has been optimized the heck out of it. Like because the entire world browsers run in this thing. That V8 event loop is really good. Basically, like that, I can't imagine I'll be able to do anything better. So we use Node to manage the asynchronous nature of our workload, which is like you're getting audio back all the time, you're sending out audio all the time, and there's like so many checks between those two. So the asynchronous nature node, either stack or the API interface, we use Nest.js because Nest has like an excellent experience around like structuring, like making sure like you have like a very opinionated interface around like how to get data moving and get data operational, and then also exposing that like by exposing that in docs, exposing that in like exposing having validators on it. So Nest.js are like kind of our choice for an opinionated framework in Node that we can run in Node. And then for the database side of things, like I love Postgres. I've always loved Postgres. It's just awesome. Never had any issues with it. And then so we use Superbase for it because Superbase has an awesome managed offering. That kind of I think gets to the heart of it, where you have Nest, Node, and then of course we have like we have many different like GPU services that need to run. Like there's things that you can opt to turn on. Like for example, you want to turn on emotion detection, that's a good GPU service. You want to turn on denoising, that's another GPU service. So our cluster is like this main API gateway sharding to like different workers and different services for different stuff. And we use Kubernetes to orchestrate everything. So that's great. Oh, one thing I think that's kind of underrated that we love is Pulumi. So if you've probably used Terraform before to spin up everything. Lets you do that in your programming language of choice. I love it, where it's like you can imagine, for example, we have many different Redises that we use. We specify a list of them, and then we can just literally write JavaScript code or const Redis from Redis. It's like deploy this, and it will actually do it. It just works. It's crazy to me, like that is possible. So Pulumi for orchestrating things.
Yeah, that's an unsung hero. And so I think you mentioned before you publish an open API spec with Swagger. Is that right too?
Yes. Do you want me to link to it?
Sure. Yeah, I'll make sure it's in the show notes. You're welcome to drop it in.
Yeah.
That's something that our audience will be super interested in. Is we talk a lot about open API in that world here for sure.
I love open API. I think this is the concept of like I just envision, everything should live in my code editor. Like I just create this thing, and then the open API, like it's just like kind of blossoming into like these types everywhere. It's kind of the dream world for me. It doesn't exist right now as much. I don't think there's like it's getting there, but open API is awesome.
Yeah, it's super helpful. We have lots of hard opinions on when and how and why to use it around here. And this one of the things I like about this community is I'm always learning from people smarter than me about tools and things available in that world too. Cool. So Nikhil, I'm curious what's next for you.
Yeah, for us, I think more observability, more monitoring, kind of like going into Vapi and then being able to see how your calls are doing, knowing that they're doing well. That is kind of like what's next for us. Like giving people security that like their voice AI is doing the work for them. I think that'll be a big thing going forward too, where like you have all these agents, but like how can you be sure that they're actually doing what you want them to do?
Yeah, making the black box a little less black is a very, very valuable feature, especially when your business relies on it. If I'm standing up a customer service endpoint of some sort, I want to know that it's doing great customer service.
Exactly. So for us, it's like all about like that satisfaction of knowing it's working well.
Super, super full. So we've talked about how you build things. We've talked about yourself and your co-founder. How big is the team right now?
We're a team of like 6 right now, and definitely always looking for the next great hire. If you love voice AI and are curious about like this whole world of multimodality and getting that deployed, which we feel really passionate about, and like making great experiences for developers to make it easy, you got to deploy it everywhere. Yeah, we would love to chat.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. And so just to wrap things up then, where can people go to find?
Yeah, we're kind of everywhere. Where you can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Vapi.ai. We have a blog. If you're a developer and you love docs, this is a learning for me. People don't go to our website. Like they'll just go straight to our docs. Like they don't go to the dashboard. They don't go to anything. They're just like, oh yeah, just like read through the docs. I'm like, oh cool, that's interesting. So docs, we have docs.vapi.ai. Just Vapi, VAPI.ai would be the.
You've definitely found yourself in the right place. to get to people who want to go straight to the docs and read. Of course, we'll make sure that there's links to everything you just mentioned in the show note. Nikhil, thanks so much for joining today. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and I'm really excited to get in and poke around with some voice assistants myself. Please feel free to join us anytime if you have more news to share or things that you're interested in chatting through and sharing with the audience. We'd love to have you back. Thanks a ton for joining today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.